I want to start on Roblox results because we're seeing shares take a tumble there. And I'm curious just how powerful you think Roblox will ultimately be in this metaverse of the future.
I think the interesting thing is how potent is their flywheel already today. In this last quarter, we saw the company invest more in R&D than they had in revenue only 7 quarters ago. They're spending more on the next 12 months in their own platform than 3 times the most expensive game in history. Grand Theft Auto 5, Red Dead Redemption 2 cost $250 million over 5 years to make, market, and produce. That's the potency of having 250 million monthly active users, 1/4 of which use the platform per day, and $2 billion plus in revenue.
The question is, will that investment pay off? Sounds like you think it will.
It seems to be. I think investors do look a little bit disappointed with the user and usage growth in this last quarter, and yet we're already seeing in January figures that they disclosed the largest month-over-month leap in either of those 2 metrics, 4.2 billion hours of usage. The prior peak was 3.8, 55 million daily active users. The prior peak in December was 49.4. We're dozens and dozens and dozens of quarters into ongoing growth in all core metrics. I don't anticipate those slowing anytime soon.
Disney just appointed a metaverse of this strategy. Which companies do you think are going to win here, whether it's Roblox or Disney or
not thousands of successful companies? We talk about the big 5 tech companies today, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, and yet even with 1.4 trillion in revenues last year, they were less than 15% of digital economy revenues. I think there are going to be a number of different so-called winners. NVIDIA, an obvious candidate. Amazon looks likely, Microsoft as well. But we're going to see many Unities and Epic Games who in a span of months go from a single-digit billion valuation to tens, if not more.
Well, speaking of how far ahead of the curve or the ball you were, Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook actually bought the Meta ticker from you. Can you tell us the story of how they reached out and how much they paid up?
I can't actually, because they didn't purchase anything from me. I produce the index, my company, Ball Metaverse Research Partners. Think about it is, does IBM's mainframe strategy matter today? Does having a PC-focused strategy actually lead to success? These can be fine businesses. The social network is not going away anytime soon, but the future, these social and virtual 3D worlds, we're on the cusp of that future already. Facebook is losing users not just to TikTok, but to Roblox. We know where young people are. 75% of those 9 to 12 use Roblox alone on a frequent basis. And so whether or not their strategy is right or wrong, they need to focus on the metaverse. Their $10 billion hit from ATT, Apple's policy changes, actually reiterates the importance of having your own hardware and operating system as well.
So that's companies. What about the regions? Do you have a region that you think could win the metaverse? For example, Korea recently launched 8 metaverse ETFs, and I wonder what you think.
Over the past 15 years, we've seen an increasing regional virtual worlds. We'll see more dominant local companies. China is already closing its walls more than ever. The South Korean government has assigned the South Korean Metaverse Alliance, which spans 450 companies from Hyundai down to their largest local banks. And so it does seem likely that we're going to see increased clustering in this virtual world, much like we saw in Silicon Valley physically.
Now, physically in Silicon Valley, we've already seen the regular old internet having trouble dealing with challenges and hard problems, misinformation, harassment. How do you see these companies dealing with these challenges in virtual worlds? And can they really manage this?
I think that's the big challenge. Look, if we go back 15 years ago, many of the challenges we face today were not foreseeable. Election engineering, tampering, the degree to which misinformation, harassment, and the uploading of illicit materials, and frankly, horrific acts of terrorism, we underestimated most of them, but we're still struggling with how we can actually solve that problem. Facebook has 50,000 content moderators. I would assume that if hiring another 10,000 solved the problem, they would have done that long ago. And so I'm optimistic that at least the provenance of these companies, game companies who focus on happiness, on fun. And so I'm hopeful that this new crop of companies will bring a different philosophy.